This is the podcast that puts you at the pointy end of the airplane with two veteran airline captains. We'll offer insight into the pilot brain, we'll have some fun, and promise not to get too techy. Each weekly episode has a segment that provides inside information on what's really going on behind the cockpit door, and we'll discuss some industry current topics that might affect your travels. Your two pilots and co-hosts are Les Abend and Mike Strauss. Les has over 4 decades and over 25,000 hours of experience flying airplanes. The Boeing 727, 757, 767, and the 777 were all part of Les's repertoire before he retired. He was also a check airman. Additionally, Les still has the good fortune to be a 21-year contributing editor for Flying Magazine. He's been an on-air analyst and op-ed contributor for CNN, in addition to MSNBC and NBC, among others. And finally, Les is the author of Paper Wings, a mystery suspense whodunit thriller. Mike is a current A320 captain and check airman for a major airline with over 17,000 hours of flight time. In addition to his airline experience, Mike has a diverse general aviation background as an airplane salesman and a corporate pilot flying celebrities and VIPs. If you haven't done so already, please listen to the Welcome Aboard introductory episode. Don't get on an airplane until you've listened to Candid Cockpit.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Candid Cockpit. My name is Les Abend.
And my name is Mike Strauss. Welcome.
On this episode's takeoff segment, since it's in the news occasionally, we're going to discuss turbulence.
And it was a topic by a listener.
Yeah, that listener's name is...
Bethany Lennox.
Bethany Lennox, Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to discuss what causes turbulence, how we can avoid turbulence, what it does to the airplane. Is it dangerous?
It's going to be a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And for the cruise segment, we'll have a candid discussion about how an airline pilot career affects family life. And it certainly does, because you're gone half the month.
Right. Yeah.
Well, some of us are.
Some of us, yeah. Used to be. And then finally, for the landing segment, also as per a listener's request, we'll talk about how pilots avoid vertigo. It was a great question. You don't hear it very often, and very interesting that the listener knew about that. But, when you're in the clouds, you can't see any outside references.
No.
So, your ear and your body plays tricks on you. How do we stop that from you?
Right. Yeah.
So we'll talk about that.
It is, yeah. Another good conversation, another great topic. So keep sending in those emails. It's important. This is how we'll get a lot of our subjects, a lot of our topics. So again, invite your friends to Candid Cockpit, to the podcast. Again, send an email, podcast@candidcockpit.com. We'll mention your name. And YouTube, if you want to see the face. Otherwise, just listen to us. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Very good. And the other part that we mentioned is if you are taking a flight, go ask the flight attendant for permission to stick your head in the door in the cockpit and say hi to the pilots. They'd love to talk to you if you've got something to ask them.
Yeah.
And tell them you're listening to Candid Cockpit.
Yeah. And they'll go, what?
Yeah, exactly. So welcome to our takeoff segment. On this takeoff segment, we're going to discuss turbulence. So what causes turbulence? Now, this was from a listener asked this question about turbulence. Her name is Bethany Lennox. And what does cause turbulence? It's basically unheating of the Earth's surface.
So it's not the pilot up front going like this,
no,
trying to hit all the potholes?
It's not like the cartoon. No. Though that can create turbulence, that's for sure. So it's basically uneven heating of the Earth's surface, and as we know, heat rises, and that's what creates bumpiness in the air. And it's and it's very similar for those of us that are boaters. We know going across a wake. It's very similar.
Yeah, that is a great analogy.
Yeah, and it depends. Can you? You're going to talk about how you can see it. Unfortunately, it's invisible most of the time. but you're going to talk about how you can bring it out. But in a boat, the difference is you can see
what's about to happen.
You can see that wake ahead of you. And the only way you can really see it with heating or turbulence is with convection, or what we commonly call
thunderstorms. Right.
So that's something that can be potentially very dangerous. And that's as pilots, we're trained to stay away from that situation, especially the downdrafts and the wind shear that's involved with turbulence. That's just a big red flag.
Yeah,
we don't want to be
don't fly in it.
Yeah, we don't want to be there.
Yeah, our checklist even have, if there's been a severe turbulence report or a microburst alert on an airport, poof, we go someplace else.
Right, and
we don't even hesitate.
And in one episode, you explained that although it was more due to winds than anything else, but
it was a microburst alert.
Yeah, microburst. Okay.
As soon as the controller said microburst alert, I looked at my co-pilot and said, "Let's bug out.
We're out of here." So we take that pretty seriously, and even en route, we have weather radar that can predict the amount of precipitation in a storm, or looks at precipitation within a storm. So the heavier the precipitation, the more likely there is going to be turbulence, and it shows up as a red color for us.
Yeah, yellows and reds aren't good. Green's okay.
Yeah, green's okay. A little bit of rain.
And actually, some of the newer radars will actually have turbulence detection in them.
Right. And then what we want to basically say is that the airplane is designed to take it, just like a boat is designed to take it. Yeah. So there's a lot of flexibility built into the airplane, especially like wings. If anybody gets an opportunity, get on online and look up 787 structural wing test. And there's a video. It literally, Mike's raising his hands like wings. And they literally took the wings and almost about touched them above the top of the airplane, and nothing broke.
No,
nothing broke.
Yeah, I mean it goes to the strength of the airplane. Or when you're in an airplane, watch it look at the wing when it's on the ground, and then look at it when it's in the air, and you'll notice that the wing is noticeably a little bit higher. The heavier the airplane, like say a heavy 777.
Well, you can watch it flex. Yeah, absolutely.
You can see what the wing is doing when it's flying, but you will see it flex if you're in a little bit of turbulence. You will see that flex, and it is completely normal.
Yeah, and a lot of people think there's something wrong with the airplane.
That's how it flies.
You want it to do that.
You do want it to flex.
And the interesting thing is about, not that I'm pushing the 787 because I'm certainly not going to buy one, but when you watch that airplane land, it's like a bird. Yeah. I mean, the wings start to flex up. It's really pretty. It's really pretty incredible. But and what causes in the news, you can, well, I've heard of airplanes crashing because they encountered turbulence. Well, we're mostly talking about clear air turbulence now. If you fly through a thunderstorm, you hear a lot of little airplanes can't take it as well because they're not as, I wouldn't say structurally incapable, but because they're not as heavy.
Right.
But, what really happens when you hear those things in the news is because the pilot overstresses trying to get the airplane out of that situation. Right. When you have downdrafts and updrafts at the same time, that airplane is pretty uncontrollable.
It is.
And you try to do what you can to get out of it. So the accidents you hear about is because the pilot is attempting to get out of that situation and they over control. But you never, the best way to keep that from happening is to never let it happen.
Yeah, agreed. And this is, again, forecast. This is where a good weather briefing comes in. And that's one of the things that we're trained to do as airline pilots.
Let's segue into
before we even show up to an airplane, we've already done a lot of homework about what that flight is going to bring. Right. Where we are, what's happening there, what's happening in between where we are and where we're going, and then again at that destination. And sometimes a lot of pilots, at least I do this, if I know I've got a trip tomorrow, whether it's in my work jet or my little airplane, we've got a trip planned tomorrow. And I've been looking at weather all day today to see trends. And you become very familiar with what the weather pattern is going on in that particular time frame that you're going to fly.
So what are some of the tools that you do professionally that you have to?
Well, I walk outside, I lick my finger, and I stick it up in the air, and I see which way the wind direction's going.
Giving people a lot of confidence with that. That's good.
So we get a dispatch report from dispatch, and they'll include a complete weather briefing. So I review that. I have many charts. WSI is one of our apps that we use. Weather Services International, very comprehensive. You can find so much in that app. I can find precipitation. I can find where the frontal lines are. I can find the frontal boundaries. I can find turbulence, convective activity.
They supply, and this is a company that supplies all the information for a lot of local airlines and local news networks.
Right.
Weather on the ground, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So this is.
We get weather on the ground, weather at altitude, weather en route, and there's different selections on each chart that I can, A, for a time frame, and B, an altitude. So the turbulence chart, which is one of our most common used. We don't like trust me, the pilots don't like the turbulence any more than you do. It's not unsafe. It's just uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us, more uncomfortable for the person sitting in row 32.
Right. Well, it's uncomfortable for me when I get a full cup of coffee. But
it might spill.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest issue. Yeah. But so this WSI app for turbulence is great. It will depict the U.S. or a region that you want. You select an altitude that you know you're going to be flying at, let's say 34,000 feet. You select that altitude, and it'll give you a graph, pretty colors, yellow going to red, and the darker the color, the more turbulence you can expect. And they gather this. You'd mentioned that they gather this information from a number of things, their own weather forecasts, but also from pilot reports, which is another, that's actually one of the best ways to get
we'll talk about talk about pilot, because we tend to ask each other, how's the ride?
Yeah, no,
especially across the North Atlantic when there's no real actual radar control.
Yeah, good point. When we get in the airplane, you check on with a new controlling facility, and one of the first things you say is, "Hey, how's the ride?"
How's the ride? Yeah.
And sometimes they'll tell you light to moderate drop for the next 30 minutes or something like that, or there've been reports of. And pilots will give pilot reports. PIREPs will give ATC. Hey, I'm encountering light chop here at 34.
And it's interesting that we don't. We do use the terminology turbulence, but most often we use chop, which is very similar to the nautical.
Agreed.
With the analogy we brought up earlier, but we use the terminology chop.
Yeah, it's kind of funny we do, and sometimes pilots and controllers will ask, is it chop or turbulence? And turbulence being more steady,
correct,
and chop is just occasional little bumps. It's like hitting potholes. You're from Connecticut, so you're familiar with that. So we've got a lot of tools at our disposal. From dispatch doing their work to us doing our own homework before we fly, as we fly, during our flight. WSI is one of the best ones. There's some other weather applications that might not be company supplied, but they're your own. You may have found one. AccuWeather's another good one. We have ForeFlight for our general aviation aircraft, again, which is another great resource.
But they put in various parameters to when I was at the airline for quite a period of time, until they got a lot of other airlines to participate in the program, where they would actually automatically report turbulence, and that would get charted, so where you could see it on a chart or graph that you were actually looking at. But before that ever happened, and it still exists on flight plans today, is an index. So a certain number will give you an idea that there might be turbulence at this section. I think once you started hitting threes or fours, it indicated to you that the atmosphere is set up for that potential situation, and then you would confirm it by asking maybe other pilots that were out ahead of you, or whatever means you had to communicate. Yeah. So it's out there, but we are talking primarily clear air turbulence when it comes to convection and dealing with thunderstorms. That's something we can see visually. That's something that we can see on our radar.
Right, exactly. We don't need any outside resources to see the thunderstorm and avoid.
Right.
See and avoid. I mean, that's pretty much what we do with thunderstorms.
And my company required us, assuming there was enough distance for it, they recommended 20 miles on the either side of a thunderstorm and certain altitudes, and be on the don't want to be on the downside,
right?
The downwind side, you want to be on the upwind side. So there were a lot of ways that we could mitigate it. But what about what can you do in the cabin?
So this is where, when you hear the flight attendant say the captain has turned the seatbelt sign on, heed it. They are doing it for a reason. If you hear the pilot say it, that means it's even more important. And a lot of our crews will do that. We'll tell the flight attendant, so we'll turn the seatbelt sign, and then we'll make a quick PA, and then the flight attendant will make a PA. I would say, and I can't put a percentage, but let's say a majority of all injuries that are born of turbulence is because people were not seated with their seatbelts on. Seatbelt sign's still on, it's really bumpy, and people are still getting up and going to the lab or trying to get something out of the overhead bin. And that causes the flight attendants to have to be up possibly as well. So that's how they get injured. When we tell a flight attendant to have a seat, they go to their jump seats, they suspend service, they go to the jump seat, and they put their seatbelts on, and they sit there until we tell them it's safe to get up.
When you see that happening,
that's a good sign. You should really pay attention.
Yeah, you should pay attention.
Yeah.
And you know what? I used to wrestle with the philosophical idea of, well, I know it might be bumpy again, but it's smooth now, and I'd leave the seatbelt sign on. When you leave the seatbelt sign on, it's sort of disingenuous. You kind of lose your credibility. Some say, the seatbelt sign, it's not bumpy.
Right.
But it may be very soon.
3 minutes down the road, it might be.
Yeah. And do we forget sometime? Okay. Yeah. We're all guilty of that. We're all human. But most times, no. When that seatbelt sign goes on,
it's on for a reason.
It's on for a reason.
Yeah.
It really is.
I have a habit of turning it off and on when I do know they're smooth, mainly so people really take it seriously.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the best way to handle it, even though it can make you
one of those things that I learned as a very young first officer from a seasoned captain.
Right.
And made me maybe a little bit better captain. Otherwise, they're just sitting there going, he's just having fun with that button.
Yeah. Right.
But again, turbulence is, to sum it up, not unsafe, just uncomfortable. It becomes unsafe if you don't listen to the flight crew.
Right.
When you are encountering it. And there's some times where you just can't get around turbulence.
Right.
You're going to encounter it.
You have to, you got to continue or divert. And usually diverting you puts you into the turbulence longer anyhow. But in any case, it's the bottom line is the airplanes are designed to handle the turbulence.
Exactly.
Yeah. Things aren't going to fall off.
No. Yeah. People, they're going to fall down.
Yeah.
But
we don't want that.
Yeah. So please heed your seatbelt warnings.
All right. I think we got to turbulence.
There we go.
All right. It's pretty smooth right now. All right, everybody, welcome to the cruise segment. We are going to discuss how flying for the airlines affects family life. So, Mike, take it.
It is. It's a glamorous job, and a lot of people think that. The public, you get to go to these great, beautiful places in the world. And that is true. The problem is you can't take your family with you because you're working, just like you're going to work in an office. My office happens to be flying at 37,000 feet across the country. So you miss a lot of things in life if you've got a family at home.
Yeah, you might miss a soccer game.
When the water heater breaks, occasional birthday. And as we've discussed previously, seniority. Seniority has command over everything we do in the airline industry. So therefore, when you're just new to an airline, you might miss a few Christmases or, not be able to get your anniversary off and stuff like that. So you keep your florist on speed dial.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. I never thought of that.
It is. It's tough because you are gone half the month, and there are things that take place, and they usually go wrong, like I say, the water heater breaking or some bad weather.
I had, according to my wife, I have had this technique of leaving on a trip when the snowstorm was coming, so she could shovel. But I left her with the best tools.
Well, that was nice of you. So again, this is where seniority bidding comes into play, and weather forecasting.
Right. Exactly.
And when you come home, what it does do though, when you come home, is they say fondness makes the heart distance makes the heart.
Girl fondest.
Yeah,
Yes.
you want to start that one over.
I think our listeners got that one.
I mean, when I get home, I think my dog might wiggle a little bit more than my wife, but then again, in my wife's defense, she's at home recovering from Achilles tendon surgery. But it does make the times when you come home, you value them a little bit more.
Right.
Although,
my story was when I was in college toward my senior year, I was considering marrying my girlfriend, who I didn't marry.
I was going to say, does your wife know?
Yeah. But she, in any case, we had an adjunct professor who was medically retired from American Airlines, and we loved him because he was just a character.
Right.
And I came up to him one day, and I said, and I'm going to use his name because he deserves it, and we lost him, unfortunately, but his name is Whitey, and I said, Whitey, is it the time away from home, is that difficult, to have a marriage and have a family? He goes, and he gave me that cherub grin that he always had. And he says, son, it's not the time away from home. It's the time at home that creates the problems. But that being said, and I didn't understand him, at that point, but now I understand. Yeah. But that being said, I think that we've had, you have to schedule your projects in between trips. We do get more time off than the average person, but then, we're away from our families.
Yeah, more than the average person.
More than the average person. And think about, I had numerous pilot friends that raised families. Matter of fact, I'm friends with a husband and wife team that raised a child.
That's even more difficult because do they schedule together or do they schedule opposite?
Right.
So there's always a parent home with the kids.
Right. And, and then, we have female pilots that want to have their own families, and it's tough. I mean, there's certainly maternity leave,
right?
But it can be difficult. But every family finds their own individual way of making it work.
To make it work. Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is when you do get home, appreciate that you're home. Your spouse, and if you can show that appreciation that you're home with your spouse, they'll appreciate it more when you come home, and it makes it a little easier when you're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not easy. So when you're delayed or flight's canceled, when the pilot says, "Look, I don't like this any more than you do," it's very real because that pilot is trying to get home to his family.
Right.
So it's important to us.
I think we covered most of those aspects.
Yeah, except what my wife's going to do when I retire in 4 years and I'm home all the time.
Well, we'll discuss how to make that work for you. Hey, everybody, once again, we ask a favor. If you would send us an email about a topic that we haven't discussed yet, and send it to podcast@candidcockpit.com. And we've been starting to get people are actually listening to us.
Yeah.
So we've been getting some really good topics, and we'd love to mention your name on air if you give us permission. And please do. And beyond that, watch us on YouTube if you so desire, if you're brave, right?
See our faces
and little things that we demonstrate. We make little airplane gestures with our hands. That's always exciting. But please, send us a topic at podcast@candidcockpit.com, and we're good.
Mention your name. Which we've been doing a lot of. You made a comment, if it's a topic we haven't discussed, but something, if you've got a question on a topic we've discussed that maybe we didn't answer.
Yeah.
We can certainly get a rebuttal in there for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, please. All right, welcome to the landing segment. On this landing segment, we're going to discuss pilot vertigo. And what does that mean? What is it? This was presented to us as a topic from one of our listeners by the name of Michelle P. And I apologize to Michelle because I do not want to insult you by mispronouncing your last name. But thank you very much for the topic. pilot vertigo, what essentially is that? It's a sensation that we think the airplane is doing one thing when it's actually doing
Something
another,
else.
something else. Yeah. So it's a conflict with our brain and what's actually happening.
Right.
And anybody can get vertigo. You can get vertigo on a tilt-a-whirl or
Walking across the street.
walking across the street. So it's same kind of thing. Obviously, it's more serious in an airplane,
Very much so.
but it's caused by primarily the momentum of the inner ear, the fluid within the inner ear. Makes no difference what the science really is. It's just, it's something that you have to contend with. And as you gain experience and gain practice, it's something that you get better at ignoring, essentially.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we train.
And that's the biggest part of
Early
it
on.
is the initial training. If your private pilot license, they touch on it. Your instructors will touch on it. But when you get to your next rating, which is your instrument rating, you're actually truly your first rating, your instrument rating, which you must have to become an airline pilot or any commercial pilot. Therefore, the biggest part of that training is focusing on and trusting the instruments in the aircraft. And there's many ways to do that. They can put a shield over your eyes. You can do it in a simulator where they just black out everything, or they give us these glasses that are called foggles, and they're opaque except for one tiny little square at the bottom.
And it makes it literally myopic.
Yeah.
So because you're only focused on the instrument panel.
And you're right. You can't see anything else. So you really have to trust those instruments.
Right. Right.
And that's the biggest part of the training.
And it primarily it happens during in actual conditions when there's no reference to the ground.
Right.
There's no reference to the intersection between the ground and the sky.
Yeah.
And that creates, then that's what happens in clouds. You essentially have no reference at all. So that's why you have to rely on your instruments.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a very important part of our job as airline pilots.
Like you said, ignore maybe what your inner ear is telling you and trust in it. And you mentioned a tragic accident that was caused.
Yeah, before we started this discussion, we talked about
JFK Jr.
Yeah.
And again, flying at night, clear skies, but it was hazy. He was over water, and it made it very difficult to differentiate between sky and water.
It was impossible.
It was absolutely
impossible. We called it a black hole. When I was flying for a commuter airline to Atlantic City, we went to a place called Bader Field, was the airport. And if we were landing in a certain direction, we had to head out over the water, and you had a time where there was no ground, there was no sky until you turned around and saw the casinos of Atlantic City, because there was no real reference, and we called it a black hole.
Yeah, and it is. It is that reference, and your body will tell you one thing. Kind of closing your eyes sometimes if you feel like you're getting dizzy. If you close your eyes, you can kind of almost imitate vertigo. Close your eyes, kind of rock around a little bit.
Right.
Or, if you just spin in circles real fast, it's the same type situation.
Same situation, yeah. And we train for it, right? Remember
Right off the bat,
because I remember in a Cessna 150, this small, tiny little airplane, and the instructor would say, look down, and we put the airplane into what we call unusual attitudes. So it would be a steep bank, or the nose would be up high, or a combination of those. And he would tell you, the instructor would tell you to look up. You'd look up, and you'd recover the airplane to what we call straight and level. In other words, your wings are level, the fuselage is level to the ground. But you had to rely on your understanding just by looking at the instruments how to level the airplane, and we do it we do it in airline pilot training.
Do it, and it's even more prevalent now. At least in the small airplane, you've got to look at the instruments, but you have a moment to look outside. But then you also have to process. Wait a minute, all I see is blue, or all I see is brown. But in the simulator,
and you're referring to what we call the artificial horizon.
No, it was blue sky or brown dirt, but and the artificial horizon instrument is just that. It's blue on top for sky and brown and dirt. So you're right. You've got to get in the same spot. But you bring up we do it in the simulator, and it's even more important. And in the simulator, even though you're on the ground, you still get that feel. And the simulator instructor says to you before he puts the airplane in an unusual attitude, and you don't know what that attitude's going to be. Right. So you have to just open your eyes and realize it. Even in the simulator, you can still close your eyes, put your head down, and the instructor maneuvers the aircraft, the simulator, and you can actually kind of start to feel a little bit of vertigo. and then you've got to, look up. And typically in the simulator, you don't have outside reference unless they've got something on the screens, but it's typically just going to be night or dark.
Right.
And so you really must go straight to the instruments in the aircraft to get the aircraft straight and level again.
Right, and that's not to say that over the course of our career or some other times that we momentarily get vertigo, but we've practiced and we know that feeling, and we just focus on the instruments.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a mental mind game, and you've got to never give in.
Right.
Yeah, just straight to the instruments. And you said experience. The more you do it, the easier it is to put everything aside and look just at the instruments and trust them.
And of course, it's very important to do that. So
absolutely, one of the biggest parts of our training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed.
Did we get it?
Yeah, great topic. I mean, it really is for Michelle to have the forethought to think of that most people wouldn't even think about that. What we encounter in the cloud. We haven't even touched about clouds. This is another dark, but also in the clouds, you don't have a reference.
No, but the interesting thing about it is that we brought up foggles and how we initially trained for it because we're focused strictly on the instrument panel. But when you actually get into instrument conditions where you are in the clouds, a lot of folks tell me that they get their initial experience with that. It's now all of a sudden, you're distracted from the standpoint of now you can look beyond the instrument panel. You can look outside. You can look, to the back of the cabin for whatever it's worth.
Right.
And, it can cause a sense of vertigo, but now you've been trained on how to control that.
Right. Yeah. No, great. And again, that's just what a great topic. I mean, what a great suggestion.
We appreciate that.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yep.
Well, Captain Les, we've landed this episode of Candid Cockpit. The brakes are set. I can see the jet bridge driver bringing the jet bridge closer to the airplane so we can jump off and head home to our families.
Yeah.
We appreciate that you've joined us, and the next episode we'll be discussing, and this is going to be kind of fun, maybe more fun for me than you because you don't live it anymore. But what function does crew scheduling have on the pilots?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very important function. Very important. But we'll give people some insight on that.
Yeah. It's pretty much where we go, how we go, and when we go. But there's a little bit more to it.
Yes, there is.
Take it away.
As we usually ask, please, once again, spread the word. Let your friends know. Let your family know. We asked, I think a couple episodes we asked, you said to ask your dog as well, have him spread the word or her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's always helpful.
Put a little bandana on him that says Candid. Oh, we should get some swag. Yeah. Candid Cockpit
there you go.
Swag for the dogs.
We'll bring that up the next time. Anyhow, send us an email at podcast at candidcockpit.com. Give us a topic. We've been talking about that the whole episode. And then once again, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then, of course, if you're brave, come see us on YouTube. If you aren't doing it already. The faces and everything. So
I got nothing.
You got nothing else?
Again, 2 topics today. So once again, send us the email. 2 topics today on today's episode.
Yeah, it was great.
From guests just like yourself. So bring it on. We'd love to chat with you.
And remember, don't get on an airplane unless you have listened to Candid Cockpit. Until the next time, thanks for coming with us.
Thanks for joining us.